Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guests on Better Than I Found It are former Oklahoma City University golfers Daniel Mitchell and Matthew Risen. Now, Matthew and Daniel are no longer playing competitive golf to speak of, but both of them were college teammates and dear close friends of a man named Scott Kedy, who passed away on July 1st. Scott is an Oklahoma golf legend. His father, Mark, was one of the greatest high school golf coaches in the history of the state of Oklahoma. And Scott passed away, sadly, this past month. And we all attended the funeral last week. And today's episode is going to be those two guys sharing memories of what made Scott so special, and also what made Mark and Scott's mom, Paula, Mark and Paula, special parents. But Scott was a glue that kept the golf team together at Oklahoma City University. And I talked to a bunch of people about this episode, and every one of them said this is a great idea. And one of the people I talked to was Oklahoma City University coach, 11-time national NAIA national championship coach, Kyle Blazer. And Kyle told me Scott was one of the most positive and popular players that I ever coached. Everyone gravitated towards him. His knowledge of all aspects of the game was tremendous. He was one of the most creative golfers I've ever seen. He hardly ever hit a straight shot. He had unreal hands and an amazing short game. We were NAIA national champions 3 of his 4 years in college, and I have nothing but great memories with Scott Kedy. Daniel, who's going to be speaking today in this podcast, Daniel Mitchell, said, "I'd say Scott's best quality was his ability to find common ground and be friends with everyone. There were a lot of different friend groups there at the funeral, college and high school coaches like yourself, Coach McGraw, PGA professionals, the Norman, Oklahoma golf group, Surrey Hills Country Club golf group, the Ada golf group, and of course the Oklahoma City University Law group. Scott was the hub that connected all those spokes together." Matthew Risen, who actually gave the eulogy at the funeral, he did a wonderful job doing that. He said from an early age, it was clear that Scott was exceptional in many areas. Whether it was his natural athleticism, his bright mind, or his easy charm, he carried himself with a quiet confidence and warmth that really drew people in. My first memory of Scott was walking up to the 10th tee at Duncan Golf and Country Club, and I was 10 years old and Scott was 8, and we were playing in the Darren Hodebeck Memorial. Well, I ended up getting beat by that 8-year-old, and I followed his career for years, and as fate would have it, I became his roommate my last 2 years at Oklahoma City University. Scott enjoyed success on the course during his time at OCU, but even more than that, Scott's leadership and support of his teammates set him apart. He didn't just make friends, he made family. So I hope you all enjoy this episode today with Daniel Mitchell and Matthew Risen talking about what a great influence Scott Kedy was in their life, what a great teammate he was, and what a great friend he was. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Okay, everybody, let's welcome to Better Than I Found It 2 of Scott Kedy's college teammates, Daniel Mitchell and Matt Risen. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today on Better Than I Found It. It's going to be a great conversation about a great guy.
Hi, Coach McGraw. This is Daniel. Thanks for having us, and it's an honor to be here.
Hey, Coach. Matt Risen here. I really appreciate you having us on, and we're looking forward to talking about Scott.
Yeah, when we gathered a little about 8 or 9 days ago for that funeral service for Scott, one thing that occurred to me was that there was a lot of celebrating going on, a lot of celebrating of a wonderful life. And I know you guys knew him well, Daniel from very young, and Matt being his roommate in college, and both of you being teammates of his in college. But he was a great brother. He was a great brother to me. I just knew him because his father, Mark, and I were colleagues as high school golf coaches. Then Mark worked my golf camp at Oklahoma State forever. And he brought Scott several years. And then when Scott got into college, he came and worked the golf camp. So I just knew him as a wonderful kid that was always in a great mood. And you guys tell me about Scott Kedy, because I think he was great, but you guys know him better than I did.
I can jump in. My earliest memories of golf are about playing tournaments at 6 or 7 years old in the South Central Junior tournaments, and I know Scott was there. So I've known him since before my memories start with golf. He was one of the few guys that were playing in the 11 under with us that were 6, 7 years old. And like you said with Mark, I mean, my dad and Mark have known each other, I think, since the late 60s, maybe. They played against each other, and Mark's brother David, my uncles. So we had a family connection. And just as long as I can remember, Scott was there. And just, yeah, a lot of great memories. It added to the fact that he was a great player. The fact that he was a great player when we were young is added to the fact that it was just fun to be around. Even we were always playing together in these tournaments. So it's just, yeah, it's a lot of great memories in junior golf with him.
Matt, how could you be a 10-year-old and get whipped by an 8-year-old? Tell me that story.
Yeah, I was going to say too. My first memory of him was South Central Tour as well, because that was kind of the only game in town back then. And I showed up and he came walking up the tee, and I was playing with an 8-year-old that day, and I like I said, he ended up beating me pretty good. I think he was pretty salty at that age. So I think Mark had coached him up pretty well, but I kept up with him over the years after that because I was impressed by him, and I just always loved seeing him and seeing Mark and Paula, because they were just the most kind and positive people at those tournaments. And meeting him at that young age, I got to keep up with him and got to know him a little bit over the years before college. So
yeah,
nice.
You mentioned Mark and Paula, two long-time educators. Mark was a coach that I had a great relationship. I mean, Mark and we would always talk about, we had a great time together, but we always talked about serious subjects, about how to help kids, along. Mark was a great mentor of mine as a coach, probably one of the best mentors I've ever had, coaching mentors. And I remember a story, Mark, I witnessed it, and we were at Duncan Elks Golf and Country Club. You've all played there. And it was the SOI, the Southern Oklahoma Invitational. And we were playing with Ada that day. I was with Edmund, I think Edmund North. And it was after I was at Edmund Memorial. And we're standing on the fifth tee box, sort of an elevated tee. And you could kind of look down at the par 3, number 4, and you could look over to the par 4, number 3 along the wall. So you're in an elevated position. You could see a lot of area. And this parent of one of Mark's players comes running up to the tee, and she's in a full-blown panic. And Mark says, "You all right?" She goes, "No, Jimmy just made a double on number 2, and Johnny just 3-putted number 3, and Freddie just hit it in the water on 4, made a triple. What are we going to do?" And Mark looked at her. She was just in a full-blown panic. The team was imploding in her eyes. And Mark looked at her and he said, "Well, there's 3 things I know about this. 1, they didn't mean to do any of those things. 2, they not doing anything I haven't done 1,000 times myself. And number 3, they're going to do it again. So I would just settle down. It's going to happen." And can you guys picture Mark Kedy saying that to a panicking mother? I mean, either one of you, can you picture that?
I can very distinctly picture that, because that's kind of the way he always talked to any of us, really, just real nonchalant, just got to keep moving on and stay positive about it. He wasn't going to cry any tears over a couple double bogeys, I don't think. So he knew it was a bigger picture than that. So.
Yeah. What an influence he had on his son. Cause I mean, you guys watched Scott, he was a competitor and he was a great player, but he just looked like he was having fun all the time.
Yeah, I actually had that written down. He was just one of those, all of us got angry at time to time. We're all competitors. We'd slam a club or, drop an F-bomb or whatever every now and then. But I'd never heard Scott do stuff like that. He was just always so, happy on the course. He just seemed like he was enjoying being out there playing, even if he wasn't playing well. He just seemed like he was just enjoying it. He had a smile on his face, just kind of one of those guys. So.
Daniel?
And I'll piggyback on what Matt was saying. There's no one coming from someone who is a bit of an angry golfer and has broken several clubs in their life. One of Scott's favorite memories.
I'm in the same boat there too with the Daniels.
Anybody that knows me knows that. And but yeah, when Scott had this memory where he could just remember. I mean, he never forgot anything, and he could remember. He'd bring up the funniest things at the funniest times and kind of razz you about him. And the picture was. This picture is on his mantle in his living room, and it's one of our favorite memories as kids. Is I got disqualified when I was 10. I didn't disqualified. I'm sorry. I got withdrawn by my father.
Okay.
When I was 10, the first club I ever broke, and it was the South Central section tournament of champions. And yeah, I broke a club. My dad withdraws me from the tournament. Scott walks up to the scoreboard, points to my name with WD and just starts laughing, and his mom snaps a picture. And it was that was Scott, is that he could lighten up any situation. He always had a smile. He was always laughing, but he loved to razz his buddies about anything he could. And he never forgot anything. So he'd razz you on anything he could. But yeah, I mean, on the golf course, he was one of those players that we hear it all the time, that you'd look at him and you can't tell. Most of the time, you couldn't tell if he was 6 under or 10 over or whatever. He was just out there. He loved being on the golf course and he was having fun.
Yeah, I think that I would echo those. The times I watched him play in junior tournaments and high school tournaments, and when he was at golf camp, and it just kind of a breath of fresh air. And I think we all get a little too serious about this game. We all get a little bit over the top, like it's life or death. And yet he was a competitor at heart too. He did not like playing badly, but I never saw it let him affect him like a poor coaching tournament affects me. When my team plays poorly, I've seen how it affects me. It's not great. He didn't seem to have that.
Yeah.
And I'll comment on the golf camp. I worked at 1 year with him. He worked at several years, but I worked at 1 year. And I remember growing up as a kid that loved Mark and Paula, and seeing Mark. I mean, all the junior golf kids loved Mark. And then getting to the camp and seeing how the kids, I mean, he was their favorite counselor. They loved Scott. And I'm sure it had something to do with they loved Mark too. But the rest of us were, we're 22, 21, whatever we are. And it's sometimes it can be a little awkward trying to help these kids and not get too serious and all that. And Scott was just, I mean, these kids absolutely loved him at that camp. And I remember that as he made it a great atmosphere for all those kids.
Yeah. Matt, you didn't ever go to the Oklahoma State golf camp, did you?
I never went there as a kid, but I was a counselor there a couple summers, but not with Scott. I think it was before he had joined us at OCU. So, but I'm pretty sure Mark was there.
Yeah, Mark started working the camp before I got to Oklahoma State as an assistant coach. He was already working the camp, but it was a calmness about Mark. There was he never seemed to get so rattled about anything, and he always used to tell me, he would work my golf camp, and Mark was 5 years older than me, and every time I did something he didn't agree with, he'd go, "That's age discrimination right there. You're discriminating against me." And I said, "Well, Mark, if the shoe fits, I mean, you are older than I am, and now I'm way older than he was then, so I shouldn't have been like that to poor Mark."
That's funny. Yeah, those camps were fun, and I can definitely see how Scott would have been a favorite counselor. He was just fun to be around. I mean, kept it light, kept it positive, and nothing was too serious, I don't think. Although, like you said, he always wanted to play well and do well. He just never took it too seriously, I don't think. And it probably came straight from his parents, I would imagine.
I think so. Well, let's move forward a little bit, just go get to the college years, because that's where the three of you kind of converged. I think, Matt, you were a little older. You were there before.
Right.
Give me the timelines and all that, and give me some stories. I want to know some fun stories. Keep them, this is a PG or G-rated podcast, so keep them in a good place.
Yeah, I'm 2 years older than both Daniel and Scott, so those guys came in after me. But we had a pretty good group there when they all came in. Before that, it was just kind of a smaller team. We had like 7 or 8 guys my first couple years there, and a lot of guys from overseas, which was great too. But when Scott and Daniel and Stafford and some of these other guys came in, just a lot more. The team was about 15 kids, and just had a lot of fun that year. I just remember having a lot of fun. I mean, we went to the golf course. We, hung out all the time, basically. I mean, we made fast friends. Like I said, I knew him growing up, and I knew some of those other guys. But, I mean, we just basically spent the whole year together every day. Whether at the golf course or in the apartments or whatever. Yeah, it was great.
Where'd you guys play most of your home, qualifying rounds and all that at Oklahoma City?
Most of our rounds were at Lincoln Park West, and also we played Twin Hills a lot. They're kind of right there together, so we either go across the street over there and play Twin, or the kind of home base was Lincoln Park.
Matt, you didn't grow up. Where did you grow up, Matt? Remind me.
Ardmore. I grew up in Ardmore.
Yeah, it was Ardmore. I'm sorry.
Ardmore and Ada are kind of rivals. So that's why we'd always play golf against them. So.
Yeah, and you grew up in Daniel in Oklahoma City. So you played all those Oklahoma City golf courses growing up. And your dad was sort of a golf legend there in Oklahoma City. I remember being at the State Junior in 1972 at Duncan Golf and Elkson Country Club again. And I remember thinking he was this larger than life figure. He was a great player in the older age group. But I saw your dad at the funeral the other day and talked to him for about 5 minutes. It was great. And your mom, it was great seeing her as well.
At Scott, to go back to college for a second, in my freshman year, I was at OU and it didn't work out, and I was looking to transfer and looking around everywhere. And Scott was a large reason that I ended up going to OCU. And I mean, Blazer was a large part of that. I had known Blazer. I met him out at Traditions on the night range when I was a little kid, and getting to know him out there in Edmond, that old awesome little night range they had, I wish it was still there. But I wanted to go somewhere that I knew I could kind of turn everything around. I'd made a lot of mistakes freshman year, academically and otherwise, and I wanted to be around people I liked, people I knew, kind of a comfort, and good golfers also. And Scott was a lot of that. And so I talked to him, and I knew that I would, he told me about the guys that were there, and I knew it'd be a good place to go. So that was a lot of reason I ended up going to OCU.
Well, you mentioned relationships, sort of like those are important. Like in a college golf team, and I know my listeners know this because I've said it often, but it's such a small unit. You kind of need to be able to get along with each other because you're very close all the time. And it sounds like to me that the people you knew on the team right there were the biggest reason you transferred. And Coach Blazer, it was like, and by the way, he was a legend. He won, I think, 11 NAIA national championships. And I think 4 of his players played some professional tour with status. So he did a great job, and he retired, I thought, too young. But it's such a small fraternity. And I think you'd have to say that Scott during that time was probably the leader of your fraternity, right?
Yeah, I think, like, one thing I think you told me a few weeks ago, they've changed the rules now, and these teams have like 8, or SEC is 8 max, or Big 12 maybe 10 or something. That's crazy to me, because I think by the time, and we were NAI, but my junior senior year, I think we had 20. And maybe that's too many, but yeah, I mean, Scott was, the best analogy I could come up with was that he was kind of the hub. We had all these spokes of different, the baseball guys and the basketball guys and the soccer guys and people that weren't athletes, and all these friends that I've made through college, all through Scott. He was the one that was friends with all these different groups. Everyone loved him. He wanted to be friends with everybody. He could find something in common with everybody. And he was the one that connected all these different friends groups that probably would never have hung out with each other had it not been for Scott. And so you do need someone like that, even on the golf team, just among, let's say you're 8 or 10 guys. Yeah, you put that many college kids together in close proximity, there's going to be some issues every now and then. So you need that one guy that can keep everybody getting along, getting together, one everyone loves, to kind of keep everything going smoothly. And I feel like Scott was one of those guys, and one of the main guys like that for sure.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, I've coached college golf for a long, long time, but at Oklahoma State and here at Baylor, I've had 2 guys that I can think of specifically like that. One at Oklahoma State was Michael Miller. His dad, Lindy Miller, is probably the greatest player Oklahoma State ever had in college. And Michael was a good player. He finished 3rd in the state high school championship, helped his team win a state championship here in Texas. But he wanted to come to Oklahoma State in the worst way, and he probably wasn't good enough to actually, make the squad. But he was the glue that kept everybody together. And we had a lot of great players on the team during that time. The Ricky Fowler, Kevin Tway, Morgan Hoffman, Peter Uline. We had a bunch of great players, Sean Einhaus. But so there's a lot of egos flying back and forth there. You're great players. You're going to have pretty strong egos, and they're great guys, but there's a lot of friction there at times. And Michael always eased that friction. And we had another player here at Baylor that was very much like Scott, named Scout McNeely. And Scout is the younger brother of Maverick McNeely on the PGA Tour. And now Scout is caddying for Maverick on the tour, but he did the same thing here. He was injured his whole time here at Baylor, so he never got to see what kind of golfer he was. But he was the glue. And I look at both of those guys, and I think that must be what Scott was about. He just, regardless of what was going on in the team, he diffused all that friction and brought everybody together. Would you say that same thing, Matt? You were his actual roommate.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, just kind of echo what Daniel said. I just feel like we had a really good group of guys, and we all gelled really well. And I think it's probably in large part due to a guy like Scott being around, just always like he's just always gelling people, connecting, diffusing any kind of ego. Not, pretty much like the anti-ego. Not never. It was never about what we shot on the course. It was just about having a good time afterward, talking about. He was the best guy to talk about your round with when you're done, whether good or bad. He wanted to listen. He'd kind of commiserate with you if it was bad, or be happy if it was good with you. He's just one of those guys that everybody enjoyed being around, lighten the mood. And like you said, I think that's good for a golf team to have that, because you can have some friction when it's a team sport, but it's also an individual sport. You're playing against people. You're out there by yourself, and to have that guy on the team that's making everybody feel like a part of something, I think that was what he was really good at.
Every coach dreams about having a guy like Scott on the team. There's no question, because it just makes his job easier. And it makes lifelong relationships a lot more plausible. It's going to happen. And let's talk about that for a second, because you guys have had, at least 10 trips, team trips where you went and played someplace since college. So tell me about that. I think it's called Legends of Cokesbury. Is that right?
Yeah, we named it the Legends of Cokesbury because that was the apartment complex there on campus that Coach put us in. So we lived there. All the golfers got to live in the apartments. So that's where the nickname came from. We started in 2014. I was trying to remember how I was talking to Daniel earlier. We're trying to remember how this came about. I think it was probably Scott, honestly, texting. I think I lived in Dallas at the time. He lived up here. Stafford had gone to Arkansas. We were kind of all apart, at that point. And he just found a way to, have an annual trip together where we got together and spent time together. And it started off small with only 4 of us then, but it grew to 8 several times in the last, 5 or 6 years. It started off, we'd go to Albuquerque or just Arkansas. And we ended up, last couple, we've been to Ireland, Bandon Dunes. We went some bigger places in recent years. And one of the funny things I remembered about the golf trip was that Mark would always make a scoreboard for us. He would actually make a official scoreboard with everybody's name on it. And I think he really enjoyed doing that, kind of being a part of it. So yeah, Scott was very instrumental in the golf trips that we did, and honestly made them what they were. So.
Same, Daniel?
Yeah, so I only went on one of the golf trips, but I was always following along and interested, and just for whatever reason I just couldn't go. And then I ended up finally, I was like, all right, they're doing one in Texas. I'm going. It was close enough where I could go. And man, I wish I had gone on more. I went on that one and it was a blast, and it's one of the best memories I have. From start to finish, they're awesome. But like Matt said, I think it's just Scott. When I asked who started it, and they kind of saying, well, Scott was kind of the brainchild behind it. It just made sense. I talked to several of our friends before this, kind of getting ideas and stories together and things like that. And one of our friends, Carrie, who's real close to all of us, who I became closer with through Scott in college, she summed it up as, the best thing about him was how he was connected and truly cared for all of his people. And that it made sense that Scott would want to reach out to all the teammates that have scattered around different states and around the country and just say, hey, let's get together. Because I think they said in the funeral, he was an only child, but he said the best thing about being an only child was that he could choose his siblings. And I think that was him, was he loved golf trips. He had so many friends, so many different golf trips, and just wanted to that was his happy place, just to get together with friends and do anything that you wanted to do. He just wanted to be together.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing about golf. I'm sure it's that way in other sports as well, but definitely in golf, you build lifelong relationships. And it was funny, Daniel, you and I have connected over the last, I don't know how long, but you were playing the men's state amateur at Ridgewood Country Club right here in Waco last month. And you called and we had breakfast together. And I thought to myself, these are relationships. We haven't been around each other at all for a long, long time, but you wanted to reignite that relationship or that, friendship that we had. And we had a great talk, and you didn't play as well as you wanted to in the state am, but you got to practice more, Dan. You got to play more.
It's hard to practice in a garage.
Yeah. Matt, are you playing any golf these days?
I still play a decent amount. I say decent amount, probably about once a week. So it's something to get, Daniel and I are both attorneys, so we're working pretty hard a lot of the time, but I think he probably say the same thing. It kind of gives you a release to go out there, and I just like to play. It's just something for me to do. I don't hunt or fish or anything like that. So just kind of what I do. So but yeah, I'm
Okay.
still
And
playing,
Matt and I are
up here in
playing
the city. So
sorry. Yeah, Matt and I are playing the USGA four-ball qualifier together here in about 2 months, I guess, or 3 months. So
Where are y'all playing that?
you remember the name of that place? It's in
yeah,
Arkansas.
it's at Mystic Creek and is it El Dorado, Arkansas? I think maybe.
So
Yeah, guys, do a little preparation. Go on Google Earth, get a yardage book well ahead of time. You can get the Strakaline book or the Putt View book. You can do some work on this. You don't just have to show up the day of the event. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, right. We're pretty bad about that now. Just we just roll out there. So
Sorry, that's the coach in me. I'm trying
maybe
to
you can maybe come caddy for us, Mike.
Well, my caddying days are probably done. I don't know. And if you can't shoot a score for the Baylor Bears, I probably don't need to spend much time with you. Either
we
of you have
We don't have any
eligibility.
eligibility left. Neither one
We
of
could
us.
probably use your help though. So
Well, anyway, okay. Give me the most interesting, inspirational, funny, interesting story about Scott during college that you guys can remember. You got one that's off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you, hundreds. We could be here all day. But I mean, there's a few quick ones. I know one of our teammates said that, Scott's nickname, his first nickname was Ardilla at school, which is Spanish for squirrel, because he was the kind of player that he'd hit it, in the trees everywhere, no matter what. You were worried about him holding it or getting it. You knew he was going to get up and down on you. You were just worried about whether he was going to make it from behind a tree or something crazy. And I mean, I can attest to that my entire life. You're playing Scott and you're like, most people are like, this guy's dead. And you're like, no, not only is he going to hit it 2 or 3 feet, he might hit the shot that you never thought you were supposed to hit, and he's going to hit it and he might make it. And so,
Maybe you should have paid attention. He could have taught you something.
believe me, we all paid attention to Scott when he had the best hands. We always say he had the best hands of anybody around, but I don't care how much you were paying attention. You just couldn't hit some of the shots he hit. I mean, you just couldn't do it.
Wow.
But I mean, that leads into one of my favorite memories of him in college golf was he was playing, I think, the 4 or 5 spot for us my senior year in the fall in the UC Ferguson, which tournament's been around. I mean, you'll know more than I think since the 60s, maybe or
Yes.
longer. And it was our home tournament at Lincoln West, and he hits it. We go into a playoff. In short, we go into a playoff against Oklahoma Christian. And he hits his drive to the left of that little batch of trees on 18 at Lincoln West, and the pin's on the right. And I remember he's in a spot. I walk over there, and we're in the group together, and he's in a spot where you could kick it on the green. I mean, it's not that much trouble. And Coach Blazer walks over, and I remember Scott, he used to hold his hand up. He'd give you the kind of shoo away. He'd do it to all of us, and he just kind of, wave you away. I got it. And he pulls out a lob wedge, and we're all going, oh, God. I mean, he's flopping it over the trees for no reason. And that's just how he was. And I mean, like I said, you could bump and run it, you could kick, you could throw it, you could chip it on the green, whatever you want to. And we're in a playoff, and he hits this flop shot over the trees and hits it in the strap, hits it to like 6 inches to keep us in the playoff to go to the next hole. And then we go to 17 of the playoff. And I'll never forget this. The pin's front right, and there's that big slope on 17 to the west on the right side. And he hits it back right with a wedge from like 90 yards. And he just shakes his head, and we walk up there, and we go back and look at the putt, and he looks at me and he goes, I like this one. And we start laughing because him and I, our whole lives, we're two of the few right-handed golfers that would prefer downhill left to right putts. We both hated uphill right to left our whole lives. And it's rare, but he called them yum-yums. When he got a downhill left to right putt, he'd just go yum-yum. And he's like, I love this. And he tells me, he's like, I'm going to make it. And he got up there and he made it to win the tournament. And this putt, I mean, you could hit that putt 10 times and end up in 10 very different places. And it was 35 feet up and across that hill. And that was Scott. I mean, you just never knew. He was a danger to make every shot, every putt, but he would do some crazy things and you just laugh it off and you're like, yeah, that's Scott.
Yeah,
Matt, do you have any stories about his golf like that?
Daniel was talking about his shots and his hands. That kind of reminded me of a story. He was definitely the kind of like a Phil Mickelson type of player. I think he just enjoyed being out there hitting shots, and there was no punch out, there was no layups. He was taking that, and he could hit a lot of shots. It was kind of crazy. He bet me once. So our apartment in Cokesbury was right up against the edge of the perimeter of the complex. And the baseball field was kind of across the road, over the fence and across the road over there. And I remember him betting me one time that he could hit a 2-iron from our yard right there over the fence. And I was like, there's no way. It's not possible. And he proceeded to stripe about 5 straight 2-irons straight over that fence onto the baseball field. And I just never – it's a shot I didn't have in my bag, but it was very impressive. I remember going over there and, gathering up the balls, and the baseball coach was working late that night and was none too happy with us. I remember he basically ran us off the field. But that was, when Daniel was talking about that flop shot, it just kind of reminded me of all the shots he could pull off sometimes. And, just always looking for something fun to do. It's kind of occupying our time at night in the apartments, and he always came up with something fun. So,
the game was meant to be fun, and if it's more creative, it's even more fun. But nowadays, instructors seem to be teaching for perfection and teaching to a look, and it's got to be a certain way. And I've always believed the most creative golfers of all times have been the best golfers. Tiger Woods, as much as we thought he was perfect, he drove it all over the map, and he was the greatest recovery player of all times. And Scott, I do remember that about Scott. He would hit it in some funny places, but he always seemed to be able to recover. Like I think that makes golf a lot more fun. And we practice for perfection, but it is the least perfect game in the world.
Right.
Yeah, it was. I'll say, when he got it going well, I mean, it was a different thing to watch. But 2006, he loses the State Am final to Coach Bratton, and I remember watching the final. And talk about watching 2 different ways to play good golf. I mean, Bratton was just striping it down the middle, playing very just smart, like how you've seen him play plenty of times. And he just never made mistakes. And Scott, they're at Dornick Hills and Ardmore, and Scott is just all over the map. And I'm sure it frustrated Bratton because he just kept, I'm sure he was thinking, oh, I got him here. And it had to go into, I think, 19 or 20 holes. And Scott was just getting up and down and doing all sorts of crazy things. But I mean, I think if Scott was the only guy I've known that could play well from the middle of the fairway and never hit a straight shot. He'd just curve it 30 or 40 feet at it. It's like Bubba, he just do things and you're like, why are you doing that? And he's like, I don't know, because I can do it and it's fun and makes golf more fun.
If you've ever heard an interview with Bubba Watson, he said, I don't see straight lines. I don't see a straight shot. I have to see curves or I can't play. And he made a whole career out of that. And Scott obviously didn't play as well as Bubba Watson, but he was creative like Bubba Watson and like Phil Mickelson might have been, or, I coached a kid here at Oklahoma or at Baylor named Cooper Dossey, who's playing the Korn Ferry Tour. I think he's in 10th place this week. He doesn't see straight lines. Everything he sees curves. And I know that's the way Scott played the game.
Yeah. I remember, hopefully you can fill in the details on this, but when we were counselors that year at your camp, I remember you picked a few of us to get up and hit balls for the campers. And I remember your overall theme was to teach these kids, there's, like you just said, the instructors, there's no one way to hit a good golf shot. Look at all these different swings. And I remember you started off with Zach Robinson, who was a very on plane, just great, perfect golf swing, no extra movement.
Yeah.
And then this is one of my favorite memories of that camp. You have me get up there and hit balls, and I could not move it left to right, and you didn't know that, and you were having Zach move shots, and you told me hit a cut, and I looked at you and I was like, I can't. It's like, and you just laughed, and you're like, what do you mean you can't? I said, I can't. And so then Scott walks up there, and he's like, move, and he just starts hitting shots every direction, high, low, left, right, everything. And I remember that was your point, was to teach these kids that there's several different ways to hit great golf shots and to play good golf. It's not all about the one instructor swing. And I just remember that he could move the ball. I mean, going back to what we said before, it wasn't that you weren't paying attention to what he was doing. You could be out there all day. You just couldn't do some of the stuff he could do. I mean, it was wild.
For sure. I'm glad you remembered that. I try to do that at every camp. I want them to see my players hitting golf balls, but to see 2 completely different looks. And Scott had a different action. It wasn't the same as a normal guy, but he could move the ball. Great hands, great visual. Let's talk real quick about, before we close down, and we've talked a lot about Scott, the golfer, Scott, the glue on the golf team, but what each of you tell me what you think was the most amazing quality about him, because I wanted this podcast episode to be a tribute to just a really wonderful guy who was a credit to the game, credit to his family, credit to Oklahoma City University golf. He was a wonderful guy. Daniel, what do you think his best qualities were?
Me personally, I think he's just one of those guys that he reminds me a lot of my older brother that if you're going somewhere with him, if you're going on a trip, if you're going to be around him, you're going to dinner with him, whatever, you just knew that you were going to have a good time. You knew you were going to smile. You knew you were going to laugh. You knew there's probably going to be a story to tell later on. Like he's just one of those guys that you knew. I mean, for me, he was a guy that I called and talked to all the time, especially if I was having a bad time in life or whatever. I mean, he was one of the guys that I'd call, and Stafford kind of summed it up a little bit too about how he would just listen. He would just listen. I mean, he was one of those guys that wanted to be there for you. We've all done it as golfers where we want to talk through every bad shot we've hit every round, and we all find it annoying and we all do it. And Stafford said that Scott would be, he'd listen to every single shot you hit the entire round, and he'd be there for you, and he'd laugh, and that was Scott. He was a good friend, and he'd be there for you whenever you needed him, if he could. And so that's my. There's so many stories that could go on and on about laughing. I mean, Heath told us a quick one that they went down to the Oaklands Invitational and they go bowling, and Scott was a good bowler, and he's a lot of athletic ability. And he rolls nine strikes, and he's going for a perfect game, and then he gutters the 10th frame. And so then he said they just fell down laughing until they cried. I mean, it was just that there was always something with Scott that you just knew you were gonna laugh and have a good time. And so I think that for me was my favorite memory of him was just, he lit up the room and was smiling and provided happiness and laughter for everyone around him.
And Matt, for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, everything was always fun when he was around. Kind of one of the things I said in my eulogy that really always struck me about him was it just didn't matter what kind of person he would encounter, whether it was, what age they were, whether they were into golf or not. He would just be able to find a common ground with people and really be able to talk to them and befriend them. That's not a quality that most people have. Like, most people tend to make friends with people that they have stuff in common with. And I feel like Scott could make friends with anybody. He would find something to have in common, and he was generally interested in those kind of things with people. I think that's why he had so many friends and had so many, contacts in his, life after that for work or for golf or any kind of network. He just great networker, and I think he genuinely meant it too. It wasn't purposeful to be networking. It was mostly just because he really enjoyed people, I think, and talking to people, getting to know people, different perspectives, people that grew up with different lives than we, grew up with on the golf course or whatever. He just had a really good knack for that. I always admired that about him. So,
Yeah, that's great sentiments from both of you guys. The game of golf brings a lot of people together, and it's wonderful when you have a guy like Scott that even brings more people together. So, thank you both for spending some time with me today just to talk about a great man, a great guy, a great husband, great father. I told Mark Kedy after the funeral, I said, one day I'm going to be working a golf camp, and your grandson Chet, Scott's boy, is going to be in that camp. And I'm going to take him out for ice cream one night and just tell him how the great memories that we all had of his papa, and just so he could be happy and proud to know his dad changed a lot of lives. So thank the two of you for joining me on Better Than I Found It today to pay tribute to Scott Kedy.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. Enjoyed it.
You bet.